One individual who was fairly outspoken regarding the search for Nicola Bulley was the investigative journalist Mark Williams Thomas. Now, recently, I've come across quite a number of clips from Mark Williams Thomas, which I've now put into chronological order, starting on the 10th day of Nicola's disappearance. And interestingly, he not only shares his thoughts on this case and the search for Nicola, but also some exclusive interviews conducted with Peter Faulding. Take a listen to the following.
We're looking at the disappearance, the case which is ongoing now, day 10 into the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. We've got a number of people who are joining us as guests, and we've also got some footage that we're going to show you. We're going to give you an exclusive interview with Peter Faulding. Peter Faulding is a specialist. He runs his own specialist recovery team. He works for police forces up and down the country. He's a very close friend of mine. He has offered his services for free to Lancashire Police and also to the family. And he is on his way up there now to meet his team, who left very early this morning to undertake a number of searches. We'll talk a little bit more in detail with Peter shortly. But before we do that, let's set the scene. Let's set the scene in terms of where we currently are at. I want to play you a clip from the superintendent in charge of the investigation. This is her current working hypothesis.
When you see the river, it doesn't look like kind of an easy falling by accident, does it?
At the point where the bench is located, there is quite a steep drop to the, albeit not high, it is steep. And therefore, whilst I don't want to speculate as to what may have happened, it is our working hypothesis that she's entered the water accidentally, and that's why there is no further physical evidence on the field.
So that's Superintendent Riley. She is the lead officer in relation to the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. It's currently being dealt with as a uniform, not a criminal investigation, because their position is that they believe that she has gone missing, but there is no foul play. They've been very clear to say that their view is that she has fallen into the water. But as of yet, day 10, there is still no sign of her or any indication as to what has directly happened to her. The police themselves have been very clear to say that there is no supporting evidence that she has fallen into the water. There's no footprints on the bank, and indeed there is no evidence in the water. But that is their working hypothesis. So let's look at the timeline in relation to Nicola's disappearance. So it starts on January the 27th. At 8:43, Nicola walks along the path by the River Wire, having dropped her two children off at school. At 8:50 approximately, a dog walker who knows Nicola saw her walking along the lower field with her dog. Their two dogs interacted before briefly the witness left the field and the river path. At 8:53, there is communication from Nicola to her boss via an email. And then at 9:01, she joins a Teams call. Now, she has that muted and without video while she can still walk her dog, but she's listening to that call. Approximately 9:10, and it is approximate because there's no certainty in relation to this time, somebody who knows Nicola, again, this would be a positive sighting, saw her on the upper field walking her dog, Willow. And when she saw her, she roughly guessed that it was about 9:10. But again, we can't be certain of that time. Then at 9:30, the Teams call ended. But Nicola still remained on that call. She didn't log off at that point. So we don't know at that point whether that was the time that just before that she'd gone missing. 08:35 approximately, Nicola's mobile phone was found on the bench by a dog walker. That's the bench that's now become quite synonymous. And in fact, we've seen over the weekend that it's now open to the public to walk past. There's some interesting facts in relation to what's been found. So the dog's harness was found on a bench or near to a bench with the phone, and the phone was found on the bench. So the questions, of course, that are being asked is, well, if she fell into the water, why didn't she have her phone with her? Why was her phone on the bench? The alarm was raised eventually at 10:15 when her dog, her Springer Spaniel, was found running loose. Now, there's contradictory information as to where the dog was. Some say the dog was near to the bench, and others say that the dog was some distance away. In fact, the police, even in their own press conference, have conflicted those 2 points. But what we do know, of course, is that the dog was running free and without harness. The search now has been going on for 10 days. I just want to bring in the local reporter from that area. That is the Lancashire Telegraph. David is the digital editor there. David, thank you very much for joining us. David, a massive story, not just for the people of Lancashire, but it's now become national.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the circumstances of what's happened, with it being a mother of two young children who seemingly just vanished into the blue, it's really captured the attention of people across the country who really wanted to be found as soon as possible.
And something the police have been very clear about is talking about how safe the area up there. Now, I've been critical of that because actually, crimes happen in all kinds of areas, but this really has gripped your community. And I guess in a way probably brought a certain amount of fear because of the uncertainty.
Yeah, St Michael's on Wyre, where it's happened, it's a really, really small village. Only a couple of hundred people live there. It's in quite a rural location, so it's not the type of place that you'd associate with crime. So I think that's why it's really hit home to the people who live there, because it's not something that they see regularly, such a big police operation on their doorstep.
And what are the feelings of your readers, your readership? Are they really worried?
People are really concerned about her welfare, obviously, and there's been a lot of people sending their well wishes to her family, particularly her two young daughters who were both aged under 10. It's one of those things where you just can't imagine it happening. Your mum going missing or your partner going missing, and seemingly without a trace. I think it's really struck a chord with people.
One of the things that, of course, is very clear is the shots of the river. Now, the river wasn't under flood. And as you can see from those shots, Jodie, if we can just pop them back up again, that river has very little flow on it. Yes, it ebbs and weaves round corners, but there is very little flow on that river. Have you had incidents where people have fallen into the river and have died?
Around that location, I'm not too sure if it's something that's happened before, but it has been particularly cold up here in the past few weeks. So the water could be very, very cold. And obviously we know from previous incidents where people have fallen through ice, like there was the incident in Birmingham, cold water shock can hit people really quickly. And if she has fallen in, even if it is still water and not very deep, the shock, it could have had devastating consequences.
Yeah, Jodie, let's just pop that drone back up. I think we can see in the corner of that drone shot the abandoned building. There's an abandoned building, a very grand abandoned building, almost directly opposite the park bench. That's featured quite prominently, David, hasn't it? In terms of searches, the police have searched that area. In terms of when you're looking for someone that's gone missing, you're going to look at abandoned buildings and things like that. I mean, are there that many abandoned buildings around that area? That seems to me to be quite a grand building that's abandoned.
To be honest, I'm not too sure. It's given how quiet the area normally is, it's not something that we're too clued up on.
No. Okay. And your readerships are following this story very closely in relation to, have you had reporters down to the scene?
We tend to focus on the eastern part of the county, so it's been a little bit with staffing situations as they are. It's not something we've been able to get out. So, but there's been extensive coverage from the PA and from police who've kept.
And certainly you've been covering it at the Lancashire Telegraph as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. David, stay there. I'll come back to you very shortly. I just want to talk to you now in relation to Peter Faulding. So Peter Faulding he runs a company called Specialist Group International. They perform searches up and down the country for UK police forces, predominantly in the south of England, which is where they're based, in Dorking in Surrey. Peter himself, a former Royal Marine, is a confined spaces expert. But for years now, he has pulled together predominantly former special forces as well as Marines and Army personnel. And he uses those military experience to go and do searches in water using divers, but as well as on land looking for bodies. Peter, when I spoke to him this morning, he's got an incredibly busy time. His team are up there. Peter gave me a few minutes whilst he was in his helicopter flying up there. This is what he said to me about the search that's going on. Hi, Peter. Peter.
Oh, good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Peter. Peter, you're flying on your way up now to Lancaster to offer your help in relation to the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. What's the plan?
Right, the plan, we've had a briefing from Lancashire Police, a thorough briefing this morning, and we're there to assist their teams working closely together. We've been tasked with a lower area of the river down from the weir to search using our side scan sonar. We have our divers with us as well, while the police continue their searches further upriver. This gives us a much, better chance to get in the river clear a lot quicker, really. With that, we bring the expertise with our high-frequency side scan sonar.
Pete, we've worked together on a lot of cases. Just for our listeners, just give them an insight in terms of how that sonar works.
So what it does, Mark, we type thing behind the boat, what they call a towing fish on a short cable, and it will send sound waves across the seabed or riverbed, and we can scan up to sort of 30 metres wide, or 60 metres wide, what they call a swatty, to sweep in one go. On this one, we'll be using metres either side, because it's quite a narrow river. And then it sends a sound wave, it hits a target, and it comes back into a computer, returns the signal, which then I interpret that signal, and I get a crystal clear image of the bottom. It's not a photograph, but it's a very clear image. Every rock, every stick laying on the bottom, it's very, very clear. Because it's such high frequency, 1800 kilohertz, the higher the frequency, the better the definition. And it's not £55,000 cost, but it's the best hit in the world for this type of work. Where divers can search a small area, this can scan a very large area. And once we get a target, and then from there we can basically put a diver in to confirm what that anomaly is. Generally, a body will show up as a body. I can see it very clearly because we deal with a lot of drownings there, unfortunately, every summer. And we find them very quickly using the sonar.
Pete, what do you know about the river, the depth, the pace of it?
It looks from all the reports I've had, it's quite slow moving. The river is not in flood. If we had lots of rain a week before, then the river could rise and it will flow very quick. But it's moving very slowly, but it's shallow in places, it's deep in places. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge with the sonar parts of it, and then getting out the boat, moving the boat around. But the good thing is patches of it are shallow, which can be clearly searched by water teams wading. But we'll be concentrating on the deeper water.
Right, there's quite a lot of movement around the riverbanks as well, isn't it? It moves to an angle, so there's a possibility that if she has gone in the water, she could have been caught.
Yes, that's correct, Mark. I mean, bodies. What we generally find in normal benign water, non-tidal fast water, then when people go down, they're generally not far from where they actually went down. Nicola, there's hope she's not in there and she's alive somewhere, but if she is in there, then I'm totally confident that we'll find her.
Brilliant, Peter. And just the final word, you've obviously been in contact with the family. They have very much asked you to come up, and Lancashire Police have agreed. A very difficult time for them.
It's a very difficult time, Mark, and my thoughts go out to the family and all the friends. I deal with so many grieving families every year. It's not nice to see for anybody, and I just hope that we can bring some form of closure, along with the police teams who are working extremely hard on this, and we make a great team working together to bring closure.
Brilliant. Well, up and down the country, you work with police forces. I have the utmost respect. You're a great friend, but also you're brilliant, you and your team, at what you do. So we're all behind you. Keep us updated, Peter, and look after yourself, and safe rest of flight.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was Peter very short time ago on his flight up to Lancashire. He'll be there now. He's certainly landed, and he's making his way across to meet the rest of the team. And this afternoon they will start their search. They're aided slightly by the length of days now, so obviously there is more daylight, so they'll be able to work as late as possible. They do have lights as well, so they may well work very late into the night, I would expect. I'll try and catch up with Peter later and give you updates on either on the many social media platforms I have. So let's look at that, in particular, what Peter was saying. So one of the things that strikes me is the flow of the water. So we can see that flow of the water. And I know, because I've been on many searches with Peter, and in fact, he has done, all the recent searches for me looking for recovery of bodies. And I've been out with him when he has recovered bodies. And what is very true is that it tends to be where the person goes in, they are not far away from there. Unless, of course, there is a flow. Now, we can see from that river, there is very little flow. And in fact, at this period of time, it is quite shallow as well. So I would be expecting to find Nicola in a very short distance away from where she fell in, which is around that area that we believe. Of course, that's where the mobile phone was left on the park bench. They're going to be searching that area, but they'll also be searching much further down in some of the deeper water. So did Nicola fall in? Well, we don't know. It is the working hypothesis of the police. It is a position that they have adopted very clearly, and it is now causing problems. It's causing problems particularly for the family. We've had reports over the recent days where the family have said that's not true. It can't possibly be true. She can't have fallen into the water. Someone that is obviously very close to her and someone that knows her probably better than most people is her partner. Her partner has spoken out in recent days, giving his view in relation to what he's going through. Let's have a listen to his clip.
And talk to me. I mean, we're talking to you at such a difficult time. Just tell us your thoughts and emotions at the moment.
I don't really have anything to say other than what the family said yesterday. My whole focus is my two girls, just staying as strong as I can for them. I'm scared that if I put any focus into anything else, it's going to take my focus off that, so I've got to be very careful. Just hoping to goodness that anything comes out from the interview yesterday, no matter how tiny. Just say a massive thank you to the community, friends, for everything that they're doing. It's absolutely incredible. I just can't believe that we're a week on, and as yet it seems like we're no further on. It just seems absolutely impossible. Just like a dream. Just cannot get my head around any of it.
I mean, you're left sort of trying to make sense of the census, aren't you? It is just such a mystery.
Yeah, it is. There's just no every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them, and then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again, and it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
How are you coping? It must be so difficult. Like you say, your focus is on the girls, and it has to be, but yeah. It must be so difficult.
I don't know how I'm coping. I don't even want to actually think about that. Just focus, just like I say, it's just about the girls, that's it. I'm there for them. I don't want to really elaborate on that. I don't want to take my eye off that.
It must be heartwarming to see the public response. I mean, hundreds of people trying to help.
It's amazing. It is. Right now, it's the only thing that we can take is, that level of support is out of this world. It gives us a great amount of comfort knowing that that's going on. They don't have anything else, do we?
Well, there's hope.
We're never ever going to lose the hope. Of course we're not. But right now, it is as though she has vanished into thin air. Just insane.
So that's Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell. And of course, the comment he makes at the end, people don't just vanish. There is a reason why people go, either individually, a decision, a choice they've made, or a third party involvement. I just want to, before I go back to David and to show some more in relation to what the police's view is, I just want to bring you a couple of comments that are coming in. And please do drop me your comments, your thought processes, and we'll share and use as many as possible. There's a comment here from David who says that he's just checked the flood alert service and the river is 40 centimetres deep at St Michael's this morning, which is very interesting. And actually, if you look at the footage, you can see how it does appear to be very shallow in that area there. I'm just going to look at some of the other comments that are coming in, and let's just work through them. So Matthew said, do you believe in the decoy theory? Matthew, I don't. I can't rule it out completely, but it's possible, but it's unlikely. You'd be suggesting that this is a staged process. And if this was a staged process, I'd expected more than just simply leaving the mobile phone there. And in relation to the dog harness, I mean, what we don't know, of course, is why is the dog's harness off? And those will be questions that the police will be asking the family. When they go out for a walk with Willow, is it routine to take Willow's harness off? Why would his harness be off him? So those are questions that are really important. And of course, we don't know the answer to that, but the police will be asking that. Let's just look at a couple of other ones. Can't believe her body is not washed up after 11 days. Well, bodies, I can tell you, do sometimes get caught. And we heard Peter Faulding earlier talking about the fact that sometimes they can get pulled under. But that does tend to be in the location where they go in, particularly if it's close to, or particularly if it's not fast moving water. But you can see there sometimes is fast moving water, in which case that will move a body some distance down river. The police obviously are searching that. They've been searching that now for the last 10, 11 days. And of course, Peter's team now there will provide extra support. The sonar piece of kit he's got is brilliant. I've used it. And it allows them very quickly to search a very large area with real depth. And basically, they run it up the middle. The distance there, they'd run it up the middle of the water. And it would give an indication both sides. And if there's something in that water, a body, it will find it. It will see it. And of course, they can run that sonar the whole length. So even though they've searched it by hand, I would expect Peter to go a short distance upriver and then to run that sonar the whole length, or as far as he can possibly go with practicalities. And that will give him an indication straight away whether or not she's in that water. And I feel pretty confident, knowing Peter as I do and the way that the search team works, that by this evening, we will know whether or not she's in that water at that point, and obviously as far as they can go. Let's look at some of the other questions that are coming in. Obviously, I'm having to vet these slightly as I go through them. The caravan park, has that been checked with sniffer dogs? I don't know, but there is the caravan park. Those people who have obviously been following the story. There's the park bench, and then behind the park bench, there is a gate which leads to a caravan park. So you can just see where that bench is. To the right of that, there is a gate that leads to a caravan park. And that caravan park has been checked by the police. I don't know to what degree, but one would hope that they've put all the resources in there to check it out. And I know that certainly the owner of the caravan park is someone that has been involved as a witness and has given information to the police. Is it possible the police know more than what they're telling us? Well, of course they will. They'll definitely know more. They will be doing a very clear background research in terms of Nicola herself. They'll be building up a whole background checking to see who she's been in communication with, what her likings are, who she has contact with through mobile phones, friendships. So they'll be doing a full background check in relation to her, building that up. And of course, that won't all be being shared. But do I think they have something up their sleeve that they're holding back from us? No. They're very clearly saying this is a missing persons, not a criminal investigation. And their working hypothesis is that she's gone into the water. That is the basis. And they're, of course, saying that because there is no evidence for them to say that there is foul play. Let me just keep looking through. Whilst I look at this, let's just have a quick listen to the Superintendent Riley. Now, Superintendent Riley has given her views in terms of the search and what they've been doing. Jodie, let's have a play of that.
Precedented number of search resources have been searching the river and the bank. This includes drone, the helicopter, police divers, sonar equipment, pole cameras, underwater drone, and staff wading the shallower parts of the river. We've also had search dogs that are specially trained in the area from both the boat and the riverbank. And this has included the area where Nicola went missing, but also upstream of where she went missing, and the 15 kilometres or so down to the sea.
So how far is the riverbank and the bench to the road? About 100 metres, not too far, certainly accessible fairly easily, and you could make your way out of there. One of the things the police have talked about is this window of opportunity, and a window of opportunity is a really key term that one would use in policing, because what it means is that during that period of time, it is an opportunity for an offender, for a third party, or alternatively for that individual to disappear, to go away. And that window of opportunity, of course, is the time period where there is no sighting of that of the individual concerned. And in Nicola's case, they say that there is a window of opportunity of about 10 minutes. It's probably slightly more than that. If you look at it, there isn't absolute certainty in some of these sightings, and in individuals, obviously, time-wise, they can't be entirely accurate on some of that. The other thing is that opportunistically, sometimes things just fall into place. So the hardest things to solve are disappearances or abductions when they're by strangers. So we have a stranger attack rather than a planned attack. That tends to be far more opportunistic, and it's much easier for them to get away with it. It's unplanned, so there's no footprint in terms of what's taken place. I'm not saying that's happened here, but that small window of opportunity of 10 minutes, 15 minutes actually only needs to be a matter of 10, 15 seconds. It's that quick that you can actually abduct someone and you can get away. Alternatively, you can get away yourself. Because, of course, if she had planned this, then she would have put in place certain things. But if she has planned it, then the police, I think, probably quickly will find evidence of that. Of course, nowadays, everything we do has a footprint. Everywhere we go has a footprint. So you can go on the internet and find out where they've been searching. You can use a mobile phone to where they can be searching. So it is a mystery. It's a mystery that has grabbed the public's attention. I just want to bring David back in here now. David, a mystery that seems to not be going away. Why do you think this has grabbed the public's attention to the degree that it has?
I think it's just the fact that she has just vanished, like her partner said, into thin air, seemingly. The police have had no look in the river. There's been no other sightings of her from the witnesses who've come forward. It's a real just mystery about what's happened.
Yeah, and of course, the fact that we don't know what's happened means that people then start to fill those gaps. And of course, that's one of the massive problems with the police, is that the police try to then fill some of those gaps because they want to try and give some information. And sometimes those words might be slightly loose. I mean, I've been a bit critical of the police officer in relation to that, using the words of balance of probability. You know, those are terminologies that I wouldn't use in policing terms, but it's certainly something that they are using. As far as your readers and people that are concerned, Lancashire itself is a very safe area. I always am concerned when a police officer says, you know, this is such a safe area, you know, bad things don't happen here. But in terms of your position, I mean, I don't know how long you've been at the Lancashire Telegraph, but even some of the nicest areas have had pretty horrific crimes occur.
Yeah, the big towns and big cities, they do have a more typical crime rate that you'd expect in built-up areas. But once you get into the countryside, it is quite a low crime area. But as you say, things can happen in the most unlikely of places, so you can't really rule anything out, to be honest. And like you said, on the police filling the gap, they've been saying things like, we don't want to speculate, and then giving a possible hypothesis. But they have come out and strongly condemned people spreading rumours and theorising and stuff like that. So I think they want to keep it focused on a missing persons appeal at the moment.
Yeah, they've been very clear right from day one to say that this is a missing persons case. Yeah, they don't believe there's any evidence to support otherwise. And they've obviously had that hypothesis that she's fallen into the water. I think today will be a massive day. This will be a turning point for the investigation. We will know by the end of today whether or not Nicola is in that water. And if she isn't in that water, whether or not she has, moved downstream to a degree they haven't been able to find. I don't know that area well enough, but what I do know is that Peter and his team will be able to establish by the end of the day whether or not she is in that stretch. And then at that point, it goes back to the police, because the police are then in the position of, well, what is happened here? Because she has simply just vanished. It'll be back to the drawing boards for the police. Let me be very clear about Peter. Peter is a friend of mine. I've known Peter for a very long time. In fact, I was with him only last Thursday, at the launch of his book. He's come under a lot of criticism, wrongly so. Peter devotes his life to help people. I've worked with Peter on a number of investigations now, and on each and every occasion, Peter has been utterly professional, devoted himself with total sympathy to the families, and very often at no cost. He covers the cost himself. He has a permanent team on standby working with police forces up and down the country, and the criticism that's being given to him is utterly unfair. This is a man who's not he's not a television presenter. He's not there to give interviews. What he has tried to do is to support the family. He's gone up there to help the family at their request and worked very closely with the police. He is one of the best. He's got all the equipment, far better equipment than the police have, and that's just simply because of resources and the commitment that the police have put to particularly underwater searching over the last decade, really. Most police forces no longer have an underwater search facility, but he provides that. And up and down the country, he provides, predominantly in the south of England, but he provides that to police forces when they call him in to recover bodies from the water. So that criticism is unduly, it's unfair, and it's without any foundation at all. Peter has found himself under the spotlight, understandably so. He's gone up to a massive story, and of course he's going to be asked questions. But those people have been critical of him. I'd ask you to stand back and say, what have you done to help? Peter has put himself on the line. He's gone out there with his team at his own cost, and his people that work for him are brilliant. They're mainly all ex-military, but they're fantastic. So let's just get that very clear. Anybody who wants to criticise Peter, then I think it's utterly unfair. He's doing all he can to try and support the family using his expertise. Let's move on. So the current situation with the police, from a press conference they gave yesterday from Superintendent Riley, who is the face of the investigation. We know that it's being led by a senior investigating officer. And for those people that don't understand, so that's an officer who's been through the senior investigating officer's course to deal with critical incidents, murders, and will come from a detective background. So they are leading it. They're not the face of it, but they are leading it. And they are directing where those inquiries come from. And they'll be running daily policy books looking at all those avenues. So those people are suggesting it isn't being looked at by detectives and CID are wrong. They are all over this. But Superintendent Riley is the face of it. And more often now, police forces do bring a face to front the media, because it's a big job. It's a high profile job, but also you have to be in a way part of the inquiry, but also detached from it, so that you're in a position where you can give information, but obviously not all of the information, because there'll be information that needs to be kept back. So Superintendent Riley is the face of it. She gave a press conference yesterday. Let's listen to the first point that she made, which was very clearly to say that they believe that she has fallen in the water and that it isn't a suspicious investigation.
Our work around the search of the river and the riverbank continues, and this includes many pieces of different technical equipment, including sonar, pole cameras, drones, underwater drones, and so on, as well as specialist dogs. As I said on Friday, the river is a complex area to search. It's not a still water, it's a fast-flowing, moving water that is tidal in parts. And as acknowledged by some of the many national search advisors and experts that we've been consulting throughout, this makes it particularly complex. We have already discounted particular areas of the river, but as they are tidal, we have researched them to ensure that nothing has been washed back into those search areas. This is why you may see some areas already searched, being researched for no other reason than it is tidal. We have 6 people searching the riverbanks every day. These are specially trained search officers who are very experienced both in missing people inquiries and in other inquiries, who are systematically and methodically searching the riverbank and the open ground. We also have a number of divers from the Regional Underwater Search Unit, and they are working with SGI and the other partners that I have mentioned to search the river itself. Throughout this investigation, as I've said, we remain fully open to any information that is credible and factual to try and trace Nicola and bring answers for her family. But it does remain our belief that Nicola sadly fell into the river and that this is a missing person inquiry. And it is important to stress that any information that comes in that indicates otherwise is being checked out all the time and negated as each inquiry comes up. We're not closed in any way to any particular line of inquiry, and we remain genuinely open to that. All these extensive inquiries, however, have so far not found anything of note. Any indications of physical objects in the river, such as natural debris, trees and the like, have been already identified by the original divers and discounted. So further sightings of that debris are only items that we already knew were on the riverbed or in the riverbank.
So there we are. That was a press conference yesterday from Superintendent Riley. I've got Peter Faulding now on the line. Unfortunately, he's got technical problems. He can't join us on video, but he is going to join us now on audio. Peter, thank you for joining me. This is a very difficult time for everybody. Just give us an update in terms of where you are with the search.
So we came up here and we were tasked by the police to search specific areas. One being the weir from where the mobile phone, Nicola's mobile phone, was found, down to the weir. Now, this area had already been searched 3 times by police underwater search teams, including the day she went missing. And then we searched then up the river about another mile, just up the river, to thoroughly clear that area. And now I can be 100% sure that that part of the river, after all the searches, is completely clear and no sign of Nicola. Now, the next area we searched was an area over the weir, which eventually leads into a sort of a tidal area. Down there are various areas of bits of reeds and things where a body could potentially get lodged, but obviously you can't pick that up on sonar, but there's not many. So I'm quite happy that that area has been cleared as well. Further down from that bridge, that is now the police are searching that. That is not our area to search. So we've come up to search, and we've done everything we were tasked with thoroughly, and my team and I worked extremely hard for this family, and I'm happy that Nicola is not in the part of the river that we have searched.
Brilliant. Peter, just where the weir is, and we've seen pictures of that weir, just beyond that, it looks like there's pebbles or stones, and looking at it seemed to be quite difficult how a body could progress beyond that.
Yeah, well, the river was a bit higher on the day. It was about a foot higher than it is now, Mark, slightly higher. And on the day, it was flowing over the weir. So there is a remote possibility, but I would say a big but here. I threw a stick in the river today at the corner, large stick. And although the river's not quite as high as it was on the day, the stick sort of done a circle, as you expect on a corner, and it went slightly upstream, and it hovered around that area for 20 minutes, and it didn't move in 20 minutes. I actually videoed it. So that was an interesting point. And the area below the bank, on the steep bank down, is about a foot deep, and it's got lots of rocks on. So on a day, if you add a foot, you've got about realistic maximum probably 3 feet of water at the bottom of the bank onto rocks. So that's obviously Nicola. If she had fallen in there, she would have hit rocks, or she would have slid down and stood on rocks. So there was somewhere to purchase. Yeah.
Peter, I've been on a number of searches with you for water when sadly you have recovered a body. One of the things, obviously, when someone goes into the water is that once they've obviously drowned, that they will sink to the bottom initially and then they will come up. Just explain that to me.
Yeah, well, they generally, once they do drown, they usually go to the bottom and they stay on the bottom, Mark, for a number of days. And they literally drag along the bottom and be graphic about that. Their knuckles are often worn where they curl up and they just drag along the bottom in a faster moving current. But most of the drownings we deal with each summer, we find them after 1 or 2 days, depends when we get called, because we find them quickly once we arrive, are generally in the same place they went down. Now, when we recovered poor Ellis Downs in Oxfordshire, they searched for him for 3 days and there was no sign. They used sonar, they used everything, fire brigade cameras, the lot. We then arrived and I used the sonar and he was actually where he went down in the first place. He hadn't moved. So, and that was after three and a half days. So there's lots of theories going around. I'm not going to comment on, really. The only evidence that we've got is that at the moment that we are privy to, and that's leading the search to the water, is that Nicola's phone was found on the bench. It was still on. Just finished. There had been an earlier team call. Excuse me, I've just eaten. And the dog harness in the vicinity as well. That's it. So that's what's led the police rightly to look at the river in the first place. But obviously, there's many inquiries going on, as you know, being an ex-police officer in the background that we're not privy to.
Peter, how far is it if she were to travel down to the estuary and the sea? That's some distance, isn't it?
Oh, it's miles, Mark. Yeah, it's a long way. It's miles. I haven't been tasked with searching to the estuary, so that's the police are doing that area because it's very tidal down there, and it's a long way down before it opens up. But also, when the tide does go out, we were searching down towards that area the other day, and our boat got grounded. We couldn't get back up again because we had to pull our boat up a steep bank. We couldn't return on the sonar because the tide went out on it. So, yeah, there's lots of snag hazards for a body when it goes out. And if the body with them.
And interesting, our viewers can see this as we show the drone footage, but the river does meander and it takes a left and a right sweep. And of course, when you're looking for bodies, and we've done many searches together, bodies tend to get caught up, don't they, in the the trees or things that are sitting at the side of.
Well, yes, you're right there, Mark. We have one in Hawley in Surrey, and that was a lady, and the first place I pointed out, so they were searching for 2 days. We come along and I walked down the river, looked, and on a corner under what we call a strainer, under some reeds, put the diver in, and that's where she was. So you get an indication, with experience of where people are likely to go. And yeah, you're right. There's lots of meandering parts of the river. There's very few trees and things in this river. It's not too bad. It's reasonably clean. There's a few snag hazards. And reeds and things, and that's another problem when people get lodged in reeds. But with a heavy current, they will be moved out generally on a flooding tide.
Peter, you've been in contact with the family. In fact, it's the family that very much asked you to come up, and you were very kindly offered your services and your troops' services. How are they?
Well, I was with Paul and the Nicola's sister. Husband today, and obviously extremely sad and upset. And Paul wanted to have a look at the potential entry point, where the phone was found. And I took him along, and that was quite emotional, to be honest with you. He's in tears. It's not a nice thing to do, to sit with a sort of a grieving family. Really, it's quite upsetting. And I had to sort of hold back the tears a bit at some stage. It was not particularly not a thing I enjoy doing, but unfortunately I have to do it quite a lot. And we
We chatted. He was here about 4 hours with me today because we completed our searches. So we were just generally chatting about things and, about Nicola and everything else. And obviously that's a personal thing. But, we're just trying to get to the bottom of everything, really, Mark. They just need...
it's unimaginable. We've both dealt with families. I think one of the things I would say about you, Peter, is your compassion knows no bounds. I mean, I've worked very closely with you on a lot of high-profile cases, and the way that you interact with families is with utter respect and total dignity.
Thank you, Mark.
And
thank you.
So with the family and particularly with him, I mean, it's every minute he's grasping at hope that there'll be some news. And of course, day 12 now, and we've not really had any news at all, have we?
No, this is an unusual one. I mean, I'm with the police every day. It's a difficult one for them as well. It's nobody knows where Nicola is. This is the problem. We're in a very awkward place, and like I said, for the family, it's terrible. They just waited for a glimmer of hope, really, that maybe Nicola's still alive. But unfortunately, no one's been able to deliver that good news.
No, and the sister, how's her sister?
Well, very sad, as you'll appreciate, very sad, and just doesn't know where her sister is. This is the problem. But yeah, we had a long chat. We sat there for a couple of hours today.
Peter, I have to say, and I did an introduction at the very beginning, I can't thank you enough, and I know that overwhelmingly the public thank you. There will always be people who are critical. There will always be people who think they can do the job better and want to have a go. Yeah. We've all been there, and particularly when you're under the media spotlight. But I would like to thank you for your work. I know how much it upsets you when people are horrible to you, and understandably so. But I would like to put on record my thanks, and obviously the large majority of the public's thanks for you and for your team to pull away from your other work to go and do everything you can and you could have done to try and help. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Have a safe
Thank you
trip.
very much.
Have a safe trip back, and I will speak to you soon.
Cool. See you soon. Bye-bye, Mark. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Mark.
Well, that was Peter Faulding, as I say, a very close friend of mine, and it is very upsetting when he has faced the barrage of abuse and assaults that he has. But a very informative conversation now. Obviously, he's been with the family over the last few days. He spent time with the partner today, and they've obviously spoken in some detail with regards to the possibilities of what could and couldn't happen, and also spent time with the sister. It's an unimaginable time for them. I've sadly spent so much time with family members who have been through such grief, and every hour they cling to hope. But obviously, as hours go by and they turn into days, that hope becomes harder. The longer they stay away, and as the searches, of course, start to come to an end in relation to the river, that theory, and it is only a theory, it's a theory unsupported by any evidence, but it's a theory brought about because she's vanished and vanished by water. And a natural opinion would, of course, be she must have fallen into the water. But as we heard in the press conference yesterday, and I'm just going to play you another clip from that press conference, but as we heard from the press conference yesterday, they have spoken to over 500 lines of inquiry that are ongoing, and they've spoken to and appealed to a lot of drivers. Let's just play that footage now from Superintendent Riley when she talks about the appeal for 700 drivers dash cam.
We know that Nicola was last seen on the upper field next to the River Wyre here in St Michael's at 9:10. She had taken her spaniel Willow out for a walk, and CCTV that we've looked at shows that Nicola did not leave either the allotment lane exit of that riverside area, nor the Rowan Water Caravan Park, which has been discounted, nor any of the other locked or areas covered by CCTV. As I said Friday, this only leaves the path along Garstang Lane onto the A586, which is not covered by CCTV. But the more of those 700 or so vehicle drivers that we can identify and who can confirm that they have neither dashcam footage or saw anything on that morning, will help us to close that very small gap. And we've now identified around 700 vehicles that drove through the village on that morning on the 27th of January at around 9:10, 9:15. And we're in the process of speaking to all of those drivers to try and find out if they have any dash cam footage, what they saw on that day, or anything else that may be of value to the police inquiry. But a number of vehicles have already submitted dash cam footage. We know that around that number passed through the village that morning. Clearly not everyone has dash cam footage. So information is coming in literally by the hundreds, if not thousands, almost every day, and therefore it will take us some time to wade through that information. Well, I'm not going to talk about sort of how that those vehicles have been identified, but suffice to say we have identified them. We are in the process of writing to all of them to ask them to come forward and either confirm or negate whether they have anything that they could help us with.
That's not been going door to door, so you've got to be there.
Well, clearly not all drivers are local, so we are writing to all those who aren't in the local area, but as I said before, extensive house-to-house has been done, so if they're in the village, they will have been spoken to. Thank you.
You said that because nothing had been found in the river after that Nicola didn't enter the water, in the same ilk, because nobody's seen her leaving this Garstone Lane entrance or exit, doesn't mean that she couldn't have. Is there any chance that Nicola could have left by that way, either by herself or with somebody else?
Yes, that is a possibility, but that's why we appeal for drivers to come forward to try and close off that avenue, or to at least explain and negate any sightings on that lane. The lane between the Riverside on Garstang Lane onto the A586 isn't long. People may have forgotten, they may have been away on holiday and missed much of this publicity. So if that is you and you've returned from holiday or returned from an absence, and this incident has sort of largely passed you by till now, I would ask you to think back to Friday the 27th and whether you were on Garstang Lane and help us exactly close that gap. Thanks.
So that was Superintendent Riley talking about the dash cam footage and the appeal for drivers, of which they are still trying to get a further information from potential witnesses. And of course, that's really significant because it's the one area where there isn't CCTV and that potentially she could have exited from. I think there's going to get to a point where, of course, they're going to say that we can't find her in the river and we've ruled the river out as being her being in the river now. Of course, what's still open to them is their theory that she went into the river and she went so far downstream and she ended up in the sea, the estuary. I think the problem with that is that it is many, many miles away. And would she have been seen floating down the river between the distance of where the bench was down to the sea and the estuary? I think the answer to that would be yes. And of course, she hasn't yet been sighted. So I think the reality of her leaving that area to travel in the river all the way down to the sea and the estuary, I think is unlikely. So if she isn't within the proximity of the area that's been searched, and she isn't in the area that's been searched by Peter and his team, there are still areas ongoing. The police have been very clear today to say that this search in the water is not completed. So they are still continuing that. And of course, they may well have searched downstream, and we know they have. But what about upstream? And I've raised this as an issue yesterday, that potentially, of course, the mobile phone on the bench could have been put there by a walker, could have simply been picked it up. I've dealt with cases before where an item, a rucksack, has been really significant because it belonged to the victim, but it's been moved, and it was put the police off because they thought, well, why is it here? But actually, the reality is it's been picked up by a member of the public and innocently put onto a bench or a wall, and this may well be what had happened with the mobile phone. Of course, we don't know that. Whilst it's an important location, I think one's also got to be very open and potentially consider the possibility that she could have got into the water further upstream. That 10 minutes of window of opportunity, which the police say she's unaccounted for, you can travel some distance on foot in 10 minutes. So that could take her quite some way upstream. But so they will be searching that. What they need to do, obviously, is eliminate it in its entirety, that she isn't in that water. And they're doing that, obviously, through their own sonar equipment. It's not as good as Pete's, I can tell you that because I've worked with police forces who have different sonar equipment. It's not as good as Pete's, but it will do a similar job, but not as quick and not as effectively. And of course, their own frog team, their own search divers, and their search divers, we know, were in that water in the very early days. On day one, the area by the bench, the police put divers in there, but she wasn't in there. So I think as days go by, and we're now, so well into the second week, we're in a position now where we are, that her likelihood of being in the water is diminishing as days go by. But then, of course, what's the other options? Well, there only are two other options, and that is that she left of her own free will. Something happened in her life. People do go missing. They leave their families and move on because something critical has happened in their life, or they've reached a point in their life where they need some time away. And I've known people who have left partners, left children, left jobs and houses and moved. That is one possibility. There's no evidence to support that at all. And of course, the other option is a third party involvement in a sinister way. But again, no evidence to support that. But all three have to be on the table. And I say that because there is also no evidence to support that she's gone in the water. It might be a positive theory in so much as she's there, water's there, vanished. But in reality, if you look at evidence-based investigation, all three have to still be on the table because there is nothing to give evidence to point to one way or the other. There are crimes out there that get committed that there isn't any evidence for a long time. They just simply vanish. And it does happen. It gets harder and harder. But hopefully, over the forthcoming days, we've heard that the police have got over 500 lines of inquiry that are currently being pursued by their detectives and officers. So that's an extensive amount of inquiries that are still being pursued. And of course, the public are crucial in this case. The public give us information in terms of what's coming down the line and being reported upon. But what's the impact on the family and friends? Massive. We heard from Peter, who was telling us the impact on the partner and the impact on Nicola's sister. He has spent time with them over the last few days. But let's hear from her friend, Heather Gibbons, who talks in relation to the impact that it's had on her and what she's hopeful for.
The truth is, if we look at it factually, nobody knows until there is some evidence. I know that the family are massively appreciative of what the police have done. I think as family and friends, the way we're looking at it is between Peter and his team and the police. We feel we've got the best of the best on that water, and hopefully it will either be, there'll be a conclusion one way or the other. And if you find nothing, then maybe it's time to start looking down other avenues.
Is there anything else you'd like to ask?
So, Jamil, before we move on to the next clip, have we got any more questions coming in?
Yes, we have a question from Josh Baker on YouTube who says, "What I don't understand is why the police have ruled out a crime. There's a 10-minute gap from when her phone was logged into the conference and then left at 9:30. There's a 10-minute gap where no one knows what happened, I'm guessing."
Yeah, I think it'd be wrong to say the police have ruled out crime as a potential. What they're saying is that they believe she's gone into the water. They are saying that there's no evidence to support the third-party involvement. But the very fact that this is being looked into by detectives, there's a senior investigating officer overseeing this. She's the face of the media. She's not leading this investigation. It's being led by a senior investigating officer. And she herself has been very clear. And let's look at that clip from the press conference yesterday, where she talks about criminal lines are still being looked into.
As I said before, we will not be conducting all elements of the investigation in the public eye. You would not expect us to. That would not be the normal way things are done anyway. But I would like to reassure the community that nothing in this investigation so far, it has been checked out. If it's come into it suggesting crime, it has been checked out and discounted. So every single potential third-party line of inquiry, any potential suspicious or criminal element has been looked at and discounted. Now, people who observe and make comment on it in the media, even if they have experience of policing, clearly are not in the inquiry team and will not be privy to all of that. But the fact that the National Crime Agency peer review has absolutely wholeheartedly not identified any other line of inquiry that we have not already started looking at or completed should give reassurance to the wider public.
I think one of the things that's very clear when you have a major investigation, and particularly one that attracts the sheer scale of media attention that this one has, is that you get inundated with an incident room with people who contact you to provide information. Now, they have to sift through all of that, and whilst there is a triage in the stage of the incident room, some of those things sometimes just slip through, but they have to go through a process, and sometimes that takes days before they get to the top of the list to be looked at. So when you get inundated with information, of course it's very positive, because amongst that could be the golden nugget. It does take time to progress and go through that, and therefore, as Superintendent Riley says, they are going through that process. It is really, at the present moment in time, a mystery. Now, of course, people can't just vanish. Something has to have happened to them. They are still very focused on the fact that she fell into the water. But of course, evidence isn't supporting that, but neither is it supporting anything else. And I think that's where they find themselves. There comes a point where the police will scale things down. That's not at that point yet. They still haven't finished searching the water. But there will be a point where they have to say, what else is coming in to the incident room? But they've still got lines of inquiry. You've heard in relation to the 700 vehicles. They're still obviously looking to try and trace all of them, and they won't close it down until they get all those elements. One thing they have done is they've warned the public to please refrain from guessing, more so being critical of the family. Guesses are fine. The Miss Marples out there, the hypotheses, indeed they come up with hypotheses. Those are fine, but it's when you start accusing other people, suggesting other people, that of course is very harmful. And what we do know, of course, in relation to these investigations, is the family watch the media. The family will read the newspapers. They'll be following the stories as they come forward in all the broadcasts. So it's really important. We're very sensitive in terms of how we deal with that, and sensitive in terms of how we report that. Jamil, before we push towards the end of this broadcast, is there any other questions that come in?
Yep, we've got a question here that says, again, another comment that's quite critical of the police. Why have the police not cordoned off the bench area to take evidence? Why are they not taking this seriously? This could have been a crime.
Okay, so we know that on the day that Nicola went missing, they did close that area off. There was tape around there was police around there. There was no access to the public to that area. They have done their forensic examination of that area, and they have felt that they have secured that area, or any forensics within that area, sufficient enough that there isn't anything else to be gained there, and therefore they've opened it up. It's a public location, and of course they'll want to be releasing that to the public as quickly as possible. So once they've secured the evidence there, which they believe they have, they've then opened it up to the public. So those pictures we've seen of people walking around the area, you can see on this shot now, the tree by the bench, that's been released now because they feel that they've sufficiently secured evidence from the scene, and now public can walk around there. We've been following the case of Nicola Bulley, who was last seen on the 27th of January. That's 2 weeks today. Very shortly, we'll be going live to the scene with a development that has happened this morning, and Abigail Beanie will be bringing us from the Lancashire Telegraph. But before we do that, I just want to set the scene. Let's go back to the very beginning, in the very early days, in terms of what the police were speaking about and what their appeal was about. This is going to play a very quick conference that Superintendent Riley gave in the very early days.
So I'm here today to appeal for witnesses in the case of Nicola Bulley. This is a 45-year-old lady from the local area who sadly went missing last Friday morning at about 9:15 a.m. She was last seen walking her small brown dog on the towpath of the River Wyre. The dog was found about an hour later, as was her mobile phone. So her family are very concerned, as are we. We've mounted a really intensive operation to try and find Nicola, including a number of specialist officers from our North West Underwater Regional Search Unit and specialist investigators who are supporting the family, as well as a lot of partners like Bowland Mountain Rescue, Lancashire Fire and Rescue and others, and the Coast Guard. We thank them very much, as well as local people who've turned out in force.
So that was a very early press conference from Superintendent Riley. Let's just be clear and explain who Superintendent Riley is. Superintendent Riley is leading the visual, the media face of the police. Behind the scenes, there is a senior investigating officer, and that person is in charge of really coordinating the whole of the operation. It isn't being considered to be a suspicious investigation. It is a missing persons investigation. They've ruled out and eliminated all elements of it being suspicious. They are still working on the hypothesis that Nicola went into the water. That is not something that the family agree with. It's not something that they believe has happened. So let's go right to the scene now. There has been a development this morning. I'm now going to speak to Abigail Beeney, who is from the Lancashire Telegraph. Abigail, thank you so much for joining us. What are the latest developments this morning?
So this morning we've had police continuing to search the river. I'm actually up at Shard Bridge now, where efforts are. They're obviously moving their way from St Michael's on Wyre down to Morecambe Bay, where they are just trying to follow and hopefully find some trace of Nicola in the water. Earlier this morning, friends and family were out in St Michael's on Wyre with posters and hoping that people might get their memory jogged, and that people might remember something that happened that morning that felt originally just as a minor incident that they never thought about at the time. And I think everyone's just hoping that efforts this morning might just get a little bit closer to finding Nicola.
Thanks, Abigail. Let's just bring in Jodie. Jodie, just play a couple of those clips from this morning.
Keep it all alive, keep people going, tracking memories, just making sure that there is something out there, there is someone that's got this footage or, knows something. Somebody's got to know something. She can't be in the river.
So I guess it's just... If you were in and around the area of St Michael's on Wyre, did you see anything? Do you have any dash cam, any footage of just driving through the centre of the village? Please get in touch with the police. You may think it's, it's not important, but let the police decide that.
Abigail, so this is a massive story. This is a story that has gripped the attention of the world, and so much so that even we've got some followers from Canada who have joined us. How big a story is this for the people of Lancashire?
This is a really big story. I mean, St Michael's on Wyre is a small little remote village in Fylde, and people just don't expect crime to happen or anything like this, a missing person of this sort of volume to happen in such a small village. It's really gripped the nation as a whole. I think the circumstances are just so unusual. She's a loving mother of two. She's got a husband at home and of course a family and friends that all love her dearly and are really hoping for her to come home. Her mobile phone was found on a bench connected to a Teams call still, and her dog was found loose. And of course there's just such odd circumstances that people can't quite put together what they think has happened, and it really has gripped everybody in the country, and if obviously you say potentially even around the world.
And of course, one of the reasons why this has gripped people's attention so much is because people just don't know what's happened. There's this view that the police have come up with, which is their working hypothesis, is that she's fallen in the water. And of course, there have been searches both by the police, mountain rescue, fire and rescue, and indeed Peter Faulding from Specialist Group International joined them this week to try and help them and use his advanced technology, sonar technology. Abigail, in terms of the next steps for police, they said they were coming to search an area behind you this morning. That's really where the focus is now. They've kind of pushed it downstream very much towards the opening into the sea.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, obviously, police have been searching now in the water for 2 weeks. They've had teams out every single day. And of course, the specialist team has been out as well. And they've thoroughly searched the area of the river where it's believed that Nicola has fallen in, which is why efforts are obviously continuing to move up the river in case she has sadly sort of been taken by the current. So search teams have been here this morning and they are continuing to search the river area and just hoping that something might be found very soon.
Jodie, just pop that picture back up again, just so that viewers can get an understanding of the distance that she would have had to have travelled. If we can hold that, I don't know if you can hold it, but look at that distance. That's some distance to be travelling downstream to make it towards the sea. And of course, to be able to be travelling downstream, the chances of somebody walking along a riverbank and seeing her were probably quite significant over the period of the last 2 weeks, especially bearing in mind that this has received some huge national attention. I know Peter Faulding, who I've spoken to again this morning, is very confident the areas that he searched that she isn't in, but was also very clearly believing that it's unlikely that she's travelled that far. And I know my experience of working with him and his team, which is quite considerable in water, to travel that distance is very rare. I don't know if you've been in contact or had any dealings with the family, Abigail, but for them, this must be a terrible moment.
Yes, I've not had any personal dealings with the family, but this must be so difficult for Paul and, of course, for Nicola's 2 little girls as well. It must just be hard knowing that something has happened to her and they don't know what. And there's so many people that are coming up with theories that, of course, are not assisting the police potentially in any way. Police want to be looking at hard evidence rather than what people are thinking and anything that they might consider could have happened to Nicola. Of course, the family are also asking people to sort of stop coming to the area. It's becoming a bit of a morbid tourist destination. Some have described it as people are coming and trespassing in places, and that must be really difficult for the family among all the stress that they're already under with not knowing what's happened to Nicola.
And that's a very fair point, Abigail, because we know, and certainly I've covered some of the largest crimes over the last few decades, we know that areas attract people when they become almost infamous in some way because of the nature of what's taken place there. That is always causes a problem for the locals, because the locals not only want to get on with their life, but also having people come into the area who are there for no genuine purpose other than just simply because they want to see what's going on, be a bit nosy. There have actually been situations where the police now have had to take formal action, haven't they, in relation to particularly individuals who have tried to break into.
Yes, so on Wednesday evening, officers did have to put a dispersal notice in place. It's believed that 5 people from the Liverpool area travelled to St Michael's on Wyre and attempted to look in a property in the area. Of course, that's something which the police have said very clearly that they will not tolerate. They won't tolerate people breaking into other properties. Of course, they appreciate that people are interested and want to know and want to help find Nicola. But these kind of ways of going about it are just not what the police deem to be acceptable.
And the window of opportunity, which is something the police have talked about, they've talked about a 10-minute window of opportunity. But I just want to kind of put that into some context. What we do know is that the phone was found around about past on the bench. Well, we don't know, of course, whether that phone was just simply picked up and put there or whether or not she put it there, Nicola herself. But the situation is that it wasn't until another 2 hours later that she was reported missing. So whilst they talk about a window of opportunity being 10 minutes, the reality is it is well over 2 hours, because there was no knowledge of her for the period of time after the 9:30 and the phone call ending and the phone being found on the bench, and 2 hours later for her being reported. So when one talks of a 10-minute window of opportunity, actually that's a 2-hour window of opportunity. Abigail, just give me a sense of the community. What's that like?
The community are really coming together in this. It's really everyone's come out and they're trying to do their best and trying to do what they can while also assisting the police. The community seem to be thankful for everything that the police have done and their efforts, and of course the efforts of the specialist diving team that have come in as well and are doing everything they can to try and find Nicola. But of course the community is hurting, and it's a very difficult time for them. They're not used to this kind of thing happening where they're from. They're not used to having journalists appearing all the time and having police on their doorstep every moment of the day for the past 2 weeks. So it must be very distressing for everybody that lives in the area.
Absolutely. Well, stay with me, Abigail. I just want to talk a little bit about Peter Faulding and SGI, the group. They came in today. Peter offered his help initially to Lancashire Police, who said no. And then he was in contact with the family, who urged him to come up. And there was coordination between the family and the police. And as a result, Peter brought his highly experienced team up to the area to do some searches. He has done some searches. It took him a number of days, and ultimately they were unable to find Nicola in the areas that they were searching. One of the people that he was very closely in contact with was the partner and also the sister. And this is the partner coming back to the scene to speak with Peter.
Well, I was with Paul and the Nicola's sister and husband today, and obviously extremely sad and upset. And Paul wanted to have a look at the potential entry point, where the phone was found. And I took him along, and that was quite emotional, to be honest with you. He's in tears. It's not a nice thing to do, to sit with a sort of a grieving family. Really, it's quite upsetting, and I had to sort of hold back the tears a bit at some stage. It was not particularly not a thing I enjoy doing, but unfortunately I have to do it quite a lot. And we chatted. He was here about 4 hours with me today because we completed our searches. So we were just generally chatting about things and, about Nicola and everything else. And obviously that's a personal thing. But, we're just trying to get to the bottom of everything.
One of the things that always occurs in a major incident is, particularly where a family involved, is the police will put in what's called a family liaison officer. They really were born out of the James Bulger abduction when very much there was a need to coordinate with the family through to the police. So I know that there are family liaison officers working with the family, and they are there as a direct contact, really, between the senior investigating officer, so the person's leading the police investigation, and the family, because there is a need, obviously, to share information back and forth between both parties and to glean information. It's been really important for them to spend time speaking to all the direct family members and friends to ascertain a state of mind, to find out whether Nicola obviously had an intention to leave, or whether there was anything going on in her life, any concerns or anything like that at all, which would give an indication. And those family liaison officers have been also supporting the family, because I can tell you, having worked across many murders, many major investigations, is that families are suddenly thrown into the spotlight. It's a point of crisis. And of course, they've no experience of how to deal with that. And for them, it's a huge problem. One of the things that often plays out is sometimes a discrepancy between the family and also between the police. And the police will very much want to control information. I'm certainly aware of situations where there's been a slight disagreement between the police and the family because the family have wanted to make a comment and the police have told them not to, or certainly asked them not to in a very persuasive way. It sometimes means that the family feel they don't have a voice because it's being led by the police. And one of the situations, certainly, that the family in this case have been very clear to say is that they have no reason why she should end up in the water. There's no indication that she would walk close to the water's edge. And I know, having had someone very close to the family who has talked to me this morning, who has told me that the family are very convinced, and it's a very convincing position that they hold, is that there was nothing going on in Nicola's life. She didn't leave Nothing is missing from the house, no passport, no money's been taken, no clothes have been taken. She had every intention to come back. She booked a spa day, or intended to go on a spa day with her sister. So everything was organised for the future. There wasn't any indication that she had any thoughts of leaving. And in fact, the family are very clear from their point of view, is that there's no way that she would have left, and that therefore, if she's not in the water, which is obviously the police's hypothesis, then there has to be a suspicious third-party element to this. And that is particularly, I think, where their focus and thoughts are this morning. They're very much wanting the police to continue with the search, to search the land, to start searching properties, garden sheds, outbuildings, derelict buildings, and obviously the land itself, so the fields and the woods that do surround that area. Let's go back to Abigail at the scene now. Abigail, this looks like it's going to continue for some time.
Yes, I would agree with you there. Unfortunately for Nicola's family, it does appear that we are potentially no closer yet to finding Nicola than we were at the start of the search. But obviously everybody is hopeful for a resolution as soon as possible. I think the community in St Michael's on Wyre and the whole country potentially needs some answers and some closure on this when that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very sad situation. And of course, there have now been people online who have made all kinds of suspicions and, have got an opinions. I think one of the problems with cases like this is it encourages individuals, obviously, to fill that void. When the police don't share information on a daily basis or don't update, or they aren't being totally detailed in terms of what they're doing, which is absolutely understandable. It's totally right that the police should conduct a level of their investigation confidentially. So much so, in fact, that the family and the friends will also be kept in the dark around certain things. The police won't be sharing everything with them. They'll be keeping a certain amount of information very close to their chest. What's interesting, of course, in this case, is the police have been very clear to say that they don't believe there are any circumstances. So that will mean that they are being much more open with the family in terms of sharing. I don't know if you've seen some of the coverage on the social media and perhaps even through to your paper, the Lancashire Telegraph, but there's been some pretty vile comments from people.
Yes, there really has been some vile comments, and at a time that's so distressing, it's the last thing that the family need is for people on social media who have no links to the area, no links to Nicola, no links to the family or the investigation at all, to be coming up with theories that are really quite horrible to read, and theories that potentially involve people that are trying to come to terms with the fact that Nicola isn't around, and that something's obviously, unfortunately, potentially happened to her, whatever that may be. And it's just not acceptable at all that people are coming up with these kind of theories. Of course, the police have asked people to stop speculating on social media, and sort of stressed how difficult it is for people to be reading that are close to Nicola and just want her home safely.
Absolutely. And of course, social media and technology means that almost anybody can be a broadcaster. Anybody has a platform through social media to say what they want. And one thing that certainly appeared over the recent days, which was very troubling, is people using hashtags. I mean, there was indeed a hashtag that was used on TikTok about Nicola being found, which generated a huge amount of interest. Of course, it was only done in a way to try and generate interest for that person who posted it, but in a nefarious and totally wrong way, which of course is going to cause huge upset. What we do know about investigations that particularly play out in the media, as this one is that the public will follow it. I know certainly when I was covering Madeleine McCann's story in the very early days over in Portugal, is that Jerry and Kate were following the media. In fact, so much so that Kate walked up behind me on one occasion and said, said to me, please stop using the word Maddie. She won't understand if she sees anything in the papers or the news that it relates to her. And so they do follow it. And certainly they'll be watching the news headlines, they'll be watching and reading the newspaper coverage. And I know that certainly they'll be watching this evening's coverage on Channel 5, which I will be going to myself very shortly, who are doing a special in relation to this case. Some people will ask the question, why? Why are you covering this when there are so many other missing people out there? And of course, they've got a fair point. But of course, not every case can be covered. There are some that grip the attention far more than others. And sometimes that is simply in relation to the individual, their ethnicity, where they come from. And whilst that might be uncomfortable for some to hear, it is very true. The other things, of course, is that the way and the circumstances in which somebody disappears or something happens to them will often generate that interest. And indeed, Abigail, I think that's where we are here, because we simply do not know. People don't just vanish, but we just don't know what's happened to her, which has caused people to become so fascinated with this case.
Of course, people don't just vanish into thin air, as you've just said. It's a very captivating case, I think, for people that have been reading and following along with updates from ourselves as the media and the police as well. The circumstances, as we've said at the start of this video, are so unusual, with her mobile phone being left still connected to a Teams call with work, with her dog being left and with the harness off and the lead off. I think that the circumstances in this case, she's a loving mother of two little girls at home that desperately want her home. She's got a husband, she's got friends, and she's got family that all miss her dearly. And of course, I think that is potentially what has captivated the nation a bit more. They've not considered that something like this could happen to somebody like Nicola.
Absolutely. And of course, Lancashire Police themselves have said it's a very safe area. I've been slightly critical of that, because even the safest of areas, crime happens in. And in particular, sometimes the sleepiest and the quietest of places do become subject to the most serious and the most violent of crimes. Let's look at some of the questions that are coming in. So, Jamil, you've been taking a look at some of those questions that are coming in. Obviously, there are people who've got strong views. We have to be very careful in terms of the ones that we cover. Jamil, just give me a sense of a couple of those questions.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, lots of prayers and wishes coming in today from all around the world. As you mentioned, Canada and even South Africa as well. We have a more of a statement here which says we should get all dashcam from the area around the time, even if it is nothing. We've got a question that says, how easy is it for the body to go over that weir? Some people still asking questions about the river. Also, have the police indicated whether they will be giving another press conference anytime soon? And also, has any article of clothing been found? So those are all the questions now.
Let me deal with the first and the last one. I'll bring you in, Abigail, for the second one. So, could she have gone over the weir? So let's describe the weir. So the weir is a position where water breaks over a barrier, and then beyond that, as you can see now from the shots, beyond that is pebbles. It's very shallow there, and in fact that distance of pebbles runs for quite some way. And whilst the water was at a higher level, it certainly wasn't a position where somebody could actually travel over that. That's highly unlikely she would have got caught in that. There's also a position whereby down the bank, so we've talked a lot about, and you can see from the pictures there where that bench is. From the bank, from the bench, when you get into the water, that is stones. There are stones down the bank. So had she have fallen or gone into that river, she would have gone into stones. There's some distance before it goes into a deeper area. So if she were to have travelled down that bank to recover a ball or something like that, the police have suggested that she maybe have gone in there to try and recover something for the dog. Of course, they don't know that. That's total supposition. Because the dog, of course, can't tell them anything. Imagine if it could, so many in these circumstances, when you've got either young children there or animals there, if they could only speak, you would be able to solve many, many more crimes. Of course, that's not reality. So you have to piece it together themselves. But I know, speaking to Peter, he says very clearly that it's highly unlikely that she would have been able to fall into the water from that bench area because there were stones below. Dealing with a point in terms of clothing, no clothing has been found in relation to any of the searches in the water. Abigail, in relation to a press conference, we had one yesterday, but have you any information that there's likely to be another one today ahead of the weekend?
We have had information from the police, and there isn't going to be a press conference today, so we won't be receiving any more information from the police directly that way. Of course, there might be updates that come through the media team and are reported, but no press conference expected.
Just before I go back to you, Jamil, Jodie, can you just have a look at the press conference, the last press conference? I just want to play the clips where Superintendent Riley is talking in terms of the levels of inquiries, the 500 outstanding inquiries and the 700 drivers they're trying to trace. Jamil, any other questions?
Yeah, one of the topics that a lot of people are discussing in the comments is what is the next steps if nothing is found out at sea. What are the next steps that police are going to take?
So obviously, I'm not party to the police investigation. That will be being kept, within the police structure. Even, Peter Faulding, who was up there, Specialist Group International, they were provided with certain information. There'll be a tight-knit team, a senior command, who will obviously be being told a certain amount, and then the officers. There will most probably be daily briefings, maybe 2 briefings. Certainly in major investigations, there's often a briefing in the morning and a briefing in the afternoon, and actions given. And so let me just break it down in terms of terminology. So an inquiry is set out. So police start an investigation, and depending on the size of it, and in this case, huge media attention, that will require significant resources because people will phone up, people will send emails in, giving pieces of information, snippets. Maybe something's happened to them. Maybe they've got some pieces of information of something they saw on the day, or just a general thought that they want to provide to the police to say it may connect. Those will come into the incident room. They will then be recorded, and then it will go through to, they will be running this on a home system. So the Home Office Large Major Inquiry System. They will then take those inquiries in, and there will be an allocator, and there will be a supervisor who oversees that. They will look at it and they will prioritize, they will triage to see whether those inquiries require urgent attention or whether or not they can be done in slow time. And also, of course, whether they link to other ongoing inquiries at the moment. Those are then called actions. They're given to officers to then go and carry out. And we often refer to a TIE, which is trace, interview, and eliminate. So they may do that in relation to specific individuals. So those actions will be allocated to people. And then we can see that actually the police have allocated or have 500 actions that they talked about the other day. Let's just listen to Superintendent Riley as she talks about that.
I want to take you through the unprecedented number of inquiries that the police team has been doing in the last 11 days. We've received literally thousands of pieces of information from the public, the wider community, Nicola's family and friends, which we've been combing through diligently. This means at the moment there are around 500 active pieces of information and lines of inquiry that we're working on to try and find answers for Nicola's family. We have a team of 40 or so detectives under a senior investigating officer working daily to comb through this enormous amount of information. This is normal in a missing person inquiry and does not indicate that there is any suspicious element to this story. The inquiry team remains fully open-minded to any information that may indicate where Nicola is or what happened to her. Some of the the specific pieces of information and the lines of inquiry that they've been undertaking include house to house in the village, looking at CCTV, the various pieces of dashcam that have been submitted to the inquiry, identifying and tracing and speaking to key witnesses, a number of whom have come into the inquiry and been spoken to and given valuable information. Digital and telephony, this includes Nicola's Fitbit and her mobile phone, which has been fully examined. And we've now identified around 700 vehicles that drove through the village on that morning, on the 27th of January at around 9:10, 9:15. And we're in the process of speaking to all of those drivers to try and find out if they have any dashcam footage, what they saw on that day, or anything else that may be of value to the police inquiry.
Superintendent Riley talking in terms of the inquiries that are being dealt with in the back end, obviously away from the search at the river. So one question Nikki Harper has asked is it likely another police force would be brought in? Well, Superintendent Riley's talked herself in terms of the fact that there's been a peer review by the National Crime Agency, have looked at it and considered that they are doing the right lines of inquiries. This will continue. There will most probably be another review at a very short period of time, probably it's normally about 2 weeks. So there will be another one which will take place. There will be a senior investigating officer, possibly externally, but certainly internally, who will be looking at this to consider whether or not there are lines of inquiry that have been missed. And it's very easy because it's very easy when you're a senior investigating officer to become totally engrossed in what you're doing and perhaps slightly miss some of the other elements. You become potentially quite subjective in terms of what you're looking at. Of course, that's not what they're trained to do, but it's inevitable sometimes that as a senior investigating officer, you form a hypothesis and then you look down the route looking for that. And sometimes you may miss other elements that come into it. So peer reviews are really important. Gone are the days where they would refer to bringing in New Scotland Yard, the great train robbery. Oh, let's bring in New Scotland Yard. All police forces now have very experienced senior investigating officers. They all go on the senior command course and they are very experienced in dealing with major crimes. Some forces better than others, undoubtedly, in terms of the types of crimes that they will deal with. And Lancashire is one of the very smaller ones. There's no doubt about that. Major crime to them is far less frequent than it would be perhaps to a home counties force such as Surrey or the Metropolitan Police or Greater Manchester Police. But they still do have serious crime. And of course, police forces communicate with each other. The senior command course is of the same structure. So individuals, whatever police force you're going from, you are gaining the same experience as officers from the larger forces. So it's very easy for people to say, Lancashire have got this wrong. Lancashire have got some things wrong. There's no doubt about this. There are some learning curves for them, I think, particularly in relation to the way that they've given their messages out and handled the media. But overall, they've done a very good job. They are certainly working tirelessly to try and get answers for Nicola's family in terms of what's happened to them. And sometimes this takes time. There's nothing obvious on the plate for them. They've come up with a hypothesis. That's what they've focused on. I think we're seeing now that will probably run its course and we'll get to a position whereby they haven't been able to find Nicola's. I just hope that at that point they look round and say, well, maybe we got that wrong. That's very unlikely with police forces. One of the criticisms I apply to police forces and senior officers is that reluctance to say, maybe I got it wrong. And actually, maybe we need to look somewhere else. That's very rare within police forces. And of course, nobody in any circumstances really wants to admit they've got it wrong because, that's a very hard thing to do. But what a good thing to do. I'm always critical of individuals and I will always give praise to senior investigating officers who turn around and say, actually, probably went down the wrong path there. Maybe we got that wrong. So there's a television programme tonight, Channel 5. I'm very shortly heading up to London to be on that. I know that Peter Faulding's there. And there will also be an involvement from very close either family or friends who are going to be talking. It has hit the news worldwide. This is a story that will keep going on. And hopefully very soon the family will get some answers. Of course, they're the ones that are living with this torment and this pain every day. Abigail, thank you so much for covering this. I hopefully will get you back again. from now on, of course, this is the unknown. We don't know what those next stages are. But for you and for your readers and for the people of the village, this is heartache ongoing.
It is heartache ongoing, and I think everybody really wants some answers and just some sort of clue as to what might have happened to Nicola 2 weeks ago today when she went missing. And of course, we at the Lancashire Telegraph, we will keep all of our readers as up to date as possible as soon as we receive any information from the police about what could have happened to her.
There was significant news yesterday in relation to the ongoing search. 21 days since Nicola Bulley vanished. This is the press conference where they talk about it.
As soon as she was reported missing, following the information that was provided to the police by her partner Paul, and based on a number of specific vulnerabilities that we were made aware of, Nicola was graded as high risk. That is normal in a missing person from investigation with the information we were in possession of.
So that was the first time that we knew that Nicola Bulley was a high-risk missing person. Really important when someone is reported missing for the police to categorise that as quickly as possible, because, of course, the first few hours are really significant in any investigation, including a missing person case. The superintendent, as well as the Assistant Chief Constable, talked in terms of her being reported and the fact that they brought in specialist teams very, very quickly. They searched the area and they were specifically focused on the fact that she was a high-risk missing person. As a result of that, they announced that information yesterday. Following that, of course, it created speculation, particularly amongst the journalists in the room. And I'm sure against many of you at home who have followed this story, asking the very specific question, how is it that she was deemed vulnerable? This is the superintendent's response to the questions.
Okay, so firstly, to cover the information about Paul, it's normal in any missing person investigation that you obviously gather as much information at every stage about the person in question, which is no different, and we did that with Paul. I'm not going to go into the details of those individual vulnerabilities. I've asked you to respect the family who are going through unimaginable pain and distress at this moment. But those vulnerabilities based our decision making in terms of grading Nicola as high risk, and have continued to form part of my investigation throughout.
So that was a senior investigating officer giving their press conference yesterday morning. Quite a hurried press conference, which for the very first time saw the senior investigating officer as well as the Assistant Chief Constable Peter Lawson giving their overview of the investigation. For the very first time, as I just said, we heard that Nicola was a high-risk missing person. That led to the questions being asked. And as a result of that, still, people were left with the view, what was it that caused her to be a high-risk missing person? Indeed, yesterday, I spoke to the police and I said to the police, why is it that I'm being given information that the police, the emergency services, attended that property in the weeks prior to it? They said, we'll try and find the answers and get back to them. Later on, a number of hours later, they scrambled a press release. That press release was finally released last night, and I will tell you what they said. Over the last 48 hours, I've been in contact with the police and family. I continue to raise concern about the information, and their response back, bear with me, early yesterday, sorry, here we go. Sadly, it is clear from speaking to Paul and the family that Nicola has in the past suffered with some significant issues with alcohol, which were brought on by her ongoing struggles with the menopause, and that these struggles had surfaced over recent months. This caused some real challenges for Paul and the family. As a result of those issues, a response car staffed by both police and health professionals attended a report of concern for welfare at Nicola's home address on January the 10th. No one has been arrested in relation to this incident, but it is being investigated. They went on and said it's an unusual step for them to take to go to this level of detail about someone's private life, but we feel it was important to prevent further speculation and misinterpretation. We have explained to Nicola's family why we have released this information, and we've asked you for privacy for the family to be respected at this difficult time. I know my contact with the family last night is that they are devastated. They are in a really difficult position now. Not only are they facing the torment and the turmoil of Nicola missing, but now they've had to deal with her family life being revealed. The questions being asked now by the public, rightfully so, and of course it's the media, is why? Why now have the police taken the decision to release that information? And I have to say, I'm critical of it. I'm critical of it because they should have dealt with this right on day one. We should have been notified that this was a high-risk missing person and just given a brief amount of context in terms of why that is. They didn't need to go into the detail that they've gone into now, but just giving it so that we had understanding of why Nicola went. 3 weeks on to release this piece of information because questions being put to the police just showed that they had really a lack of control as far as the media goes, a very unclear strategy as far as reporting to the press. And of course, in the meantime, the speculation that was allowed to grow through social media, through everybody growing interest in this story, and of course, crucially, the fact that people didn't know what happened. The torment now sits with the family. And I know Peter Faulding, a good friend of mine, spent some time with the family when he was up here. Let's watch this clip of Peter with the family.
Well, I was with Paul and the Nicola's sister and husband today, and obviously extremely sad and upset. And Paul wanted to have a look at the potential entry point, where the phone was found. And I took him along, and that was quite emotional, to be honest with you. He's in tears. It's not a nice thing to do, to sit with a sort of a grieving family. Really, it's quite upsetting, and I had to sort of hold back the tears a bit at some stage. It was not particularly not a thing I enjoy doing, but unfortunately I have to do it quite a lot. And we chatted. He was here about 4 hours with me today because we completed our searches. So we were just generally chatting about things and, about Nicola and everything else. And obviously that's a personal thing. But, we're just trying to get to the bottom of everything.
So let's look at the circumstances. There are three options in terms of what's happened to Nicola. First is that she turned up on that day, having walked Willow, and she decided to go into the water, either by choice or by accident. And as a result of that, she then lost her life in the water. I'll unpick that a little bit more in due course. The second option is that she chose to go for a walk, and then she placed the phone, she placed the harness, and she left Willow, and she went away. Making her own choice, her own decision, whatever was going on in her life, she decided that moment in time she needed to move on. Or the third option, and of course the most sinister option, is that there was a third party involved. The police were very quick to rule that out. And of course at the time, they had the information that she was a vulnerable missing person. And clearly that led to their focus on the river, on the water, with the intention, of course, or the thought process that she'd gone into the water. Let me unpick that. So going back to that exact location where the bench is and where the water is, in order for her to have gone into the water at that point, she had to have gone down a relatively steep bank. You can see the bench there, and just to the side of that bench is a steep bank that takes you down to the waterfront. At the bottom of where that river is, there is a small area of rocks. So initially you land on rocks, and then beyond that, you can see there from the pictures, takes you into the middle of the river. The river in that middle area is about 3 meters deep. So if she'd have got into the middle there, she could well have suffered, she would have struggled most probably in terms of potentially swimming. But we do know she is a good swimmer. So how is it that she ended up in that water, in the middle of the water? Because surely she would have gone down the edge of the bank and stayed where the initial water was, a very shallow area covered by rocks. That is the police's theory, that she went into the water there. Why do they think that? Well, very clearly because of where the phone and the dog were. Let me recap. The police information is that on that morning, she was on a mobile phone, talking on a Teams call. They have her sighted around about 9:10 in the top field. She then moves down from the top field, and around about 9:20, they have her phone in the locality of that bench. Then, around about 9:30, she's still connected to the Teams call that she was talking to, and the phone was found face up on the bench. That phone During the course of her call, the team's call, she didn't speak and she didn't have the video on. So there was no audio and no video connected. That phone was found on that park bench. And then between the park bench and the water, we're not sure exactly where, but potentially on the river bank, because that is what Paul has said, is that is where the dog's harness, Willow's harness, was found, and that was handed to him. The dog was free. The dog was running loose between the area of the park, area of the bench, the river, and an area which is a gate. There is, you can just probably see slightly to the right. See if we can find a picture, Jodie. Just to the right of that, there is a gate, a silver metal gate, which opens on a swing. So it's like a kissing gate. And that stops the dog from traveling further. So the dog was confined within this area. So and let's use this as an example, had Nicola returned on the route that she came on, which is down a path, it's just to the right of that bench. You can see, you can't unfortunately see it, but just to the right of that bench is where the gate is. Had Nicola returned on the path that she came on, there is no CCTV. So when the police say that we do not believe she left the area, there's no certainty in that at all, because she could have left the area on exactly the same route that she walked on. And I'm here and I've walked that route, and in order to come away from where the park bench is, which is just behind where my arm is, she walks along this path just in front of me and along, and then there's a footbridge that she walked on when she came on the walk. She wouldn't have been seen by CCTV, and she could quite easily have disappeared up there without being seen by anybody at all. Jodie, let's just take a quick break. Jodie, is there any questions?
Yeah, hi there, Mark. So I think one of the big popular questions that are being discussed right now is, should the police have released details about her vulnerabilities? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult one because, of course, if Nicola is still alive, and it's a big if, then she will be aware of this, and she'll be aware now that her public information has been put into the public domain. I think the problem is the manner in which it was released. If the police had been very open from day one and said, look, there is some vulnerability, she's a high-risk missing person, and that happens all the time. You know, there are high-risk missing people whose information is put into the public domain because the public are the eyes and the ears of the police, and there's no long-term impact on those people because they're already receiving, the support and the help. It gives an understanding. It allows people to contextualize quite why she has gone missing. We all have issues in our life at certain stages, whether that becomes a drug dependency, whether that becomes alcohol, whether that becomes depression. That's the fact of life. That's the reality of the brain. The brain is a complex thing, and as a result of that, we all have struggles. I've had struggles. People, close friends, we all have struggles. But we mustn't let that overrule what's taking place now. She's still missing. I do believe that police got their strategy wrong. Put the information out right at the very beginning. Say she's a high-risk missing person. Give a little bit of understanding of what that meant. She's struggling at the moment. She's going through the menopause. She's got some issues in terms of depression, mental health, but she's getting the support. She's loved by her family. Get Paul onto the television. Get Paul to do a press conference alongside the police and say, we're really struggling with family. We're here to support her. We want her home. Get that embraced element so that the public see Nicola for the real person and Paul is talking to them. The police did not want Paul to do a press conference. They didn't want Paul to appear in front of the camera. Totally wrong strategy. And now it's backfired. What else, Jodie?
So we've had a number of questions come in. Obviously, people can ask their questions in the comment section by #AskMark. This one's from Lottie. What would be your plan of action now if you were the SIO, a senior investigating officer, on this case?
So I think now we're very clearly in two strategies. The hypothesis that the police had that she fell in the water at the point of the bench behind me there was their focus. And I can understand that to a degree. And I say to a degree because the reality is, in order for her to have gone into the water there, she would have had to have got to a position where she dies. Now, how is that possible? Well, she could have gone into the middle of the water and obviously got a reaction in relation to how cold it was and then passed out. But if that had happened, and you can see it's just in front of where Peter and Paula looking there. If that had happened, her body would have sunk to the bottom. And within a matter of hours, the police divers were searching that area, and they've been back and searched that area. So her body would have been found there. But if it wasn't there, what is the likelihood of her body travelling downstream? And you can see behind me where there is a flow. And that is where the major problem exists. Because in order to do that, not only would her body have to have negotiated 2 bends and an area in the middle of the river, which has got some undergrowth, but also, and this is the most significant, would have had to have just moving in the right way. So you can see behind me is the weir. That is a weir to which you have to get a body over. Now, bodies don't float on the water surface. They float underneath. Well, obviously some part of the body exposed over the top. So they had to have got to the weir and then got over the top of the weir. And then, having got over the top of the weir, they would have then had to have got across the rocks, travelled down here to a bend that is 90 degrees. Got to a bend that is 90 degrees. And as that 90 degrees would then have to have then travelled round the bend 90 degrees. Right? On that day, the water was 11 centimetres higher. We know that because of the records say that. So 11 centimetres higher. So in order to travel down here, she would have got the tidal element of it stops at the weir. And we know from tidal movements is that had she travelled down here, the chances are that tidal would have brought her back up again to some degree. So the problem I have with this is that in order to have travelled this distance, she had to have not only gone over 2 major obstacles, but also travelled round bends. Jodie.
So we've actually got a bit of a follow-up question here from Luke D on YouTube. If you were the SIO, again, sort of same question, what would you have done differently from the outset?
Well, I think I'd have been very clear to the public. I'd have said to them, this is a high-risk missing person, and as a result of that, we are urging people, does anybody know, has anybody seen her on that day? Please come forward. We're looking at the aspects of her vulnerability, and as a result of that, please, we're encouraging some support, rather than just simply close it down and say, we've ruled out all the other hypotheses. You still need the other ones. You still need to consider all 3. You just need to be able to be very clear that actually we've got to focus, and this is why we've got to focus. You get much more of an understanding from the public, but also the criticism wouldn't sit with the family. You wouldn't be 3 weeks on now suddenly in a position where the family are having to try and, the family have now gone into hiding effectively because of the situation that developed yesterday, which was all of the police's making. Let's be very clear, this was all of the police's making. They tried to coordinate it completely. They got it wrong. What did they expect yesterday when they said she was a high-risk missing person? Did they expect no one was going to ask those questions and try and get some clarity? And then the information they've released, I think, is far more than they needed to release. They just needed to be very clear that this is someone who was struggling with issues in their life. The investigation is separate to the media strategy. The investigation, I think, has been very positive in many ways. Every investigation we can look in hindsight and be critical of, but I think the investigation has been good. I think they've failed to coordinate it from a media strategy in a world that we live in where there's 24-hour news and social media has a huge impact. You need to address some of those issues, and you need to be working with the family. You need to talk to the family and say, listen, the backlash from this could be significant. We need to say this. We need to show that Nicola has struggles in her life, has difficult issues, and get the public to totally understand. I think Nicola left this area in one way or another. She either left the area further downstream in the water, so not at the bench, but further downstream where it is tidal, or she's still in this area having moved away and sadly, her own self, to move on with life. Those are the 2 strong views for me. I rule out, quite rightly so, I think, where the police are as a third-party involvement. I think those 2 first theories are the most likely. Jodie.
So thank you everyone for bringing in their questions into the comments section. Some great comments coming through and some great questions for Mark. There's a couple here on the same sort of line. So this one's from Kay Caller. Was Paul aware they were going to give details about her vulnerabilities? And Susan Lowe, just adding a little bit here, did the family know the police planned to make the announcement regarding her vulnerabilities at the press conference? What's your thoughts on that, Mark?
So the family were kept involved. There was a long meeting the day before yesterday where the police met with Paul and talked to Paul and gave him a bit of an update with what was going on. They were caught very much on the hoof yesterday when it came to the fact that they were going to release more information. They talked to them about what was going on and the fact that obviously at some stage maybe this information would get out. But I think they were confident that actually it wouldn't. I don't know why. It shows a naivety from the press office. I spoke to the press office and there was some understanding of some acknowledgement that they got things wrong and they were trying to put things right. They're 3 weeks down the road with their media strategy, which is why we saw the Assistant Chief Constable and the SIO come out yesterday and talk. I think the problem is that this has played itself out in the media. It's played itself out in the public because it's become fascinating. The public want to know answers, and understandably so. In this world of the crime genre, which everyone's an armchair detective at home, everybody wants to know what's going on. I can totally understand that, and the police really have to wake up. Lancashire Police, it'll be a big learning curve for them and other police forces to understand that actually, do you know what? There is two aspects of a criminal investigation nowadays, or a missing person investigation, and that is the way that it's conducted behind the scenes and the way that it's conducted in front of the scenes. And they both have to work together, but crucially, what's visible in front of the scenes also has to be done in a way that it's protecting the family. And I feel very sorry for them this morning because I think the police have done them real injustice. I think as a direct result of the way they've handled this, that's created greater pressure for the family and it's caused more torment for them. Torment that they shouldn't have to be living with when the bottom line is that Nicola is not here. She's vanished. Where is she? That's what should be the most important question. Not why are they releasing all this information? There are people coming out saying, there's victim blaming. I don't believe that. I think what's happened is that there's right that this information is put out there, but they've done it in the wrong way. And it doesn't take a lot to look at it. If you've got experience from working in the media, it doesn't take a lot to look at it and go, strategy, change it, get it different, put that information out, be totally transparent and open, and it will cause you far less problems down the road.
Brilliant. I just wanted to actually, there's a great comment here from Nico. This is more of a statement. The public are part of the investigation in the sense they represent tens of thousands of pairs of eyes in that area. What's sort of your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Spot on. Amount of times I've said that the public are the eyes and the ears of the police. The police pull the jigsaw puzzle together. They use their experience, they've also got contacts, and they've also got access to material. In a world that we live in where technology rules our lives, that creates a footprint. Where was the mobile phone? Who's been communicated on the mobile phone? Where have they been in terms of cars, because of obviously analytics in terms of cars? Where have they been on the computer? All of those things is a footprint. And that, of course, is really important. And only the police have access to that. But what the public do is they provide direct information. Who has she spoken to recently? What is her state of mind? Who has she been in contact with? Public, who have they seen? Who have they talked to? Particularly in an area like this, which is frequented by dog walkers. It's beautiful here. Those people will see her. And therefore, the public are the eyes and the ears. They give the information to the police. The police pull that together and create the jigsaw puzzle and ultimately solve the case. So the public are absolutely vital. You need to keep them on side, but also you need to work with the family. The family have grown more and more frustrated as time goes on. And let's be clear, I've worked on so many missing persons and murder cases, mainly now in terms of reviewing those murder cases to see if I can find new evidence, the suspects, and develop the case. And, we've been very successful in doing that. But what is really important is that you don't want to alienate the family. You need to communicate with the family, and you need to be in a position where you are giving them the right information. The problem is family are suddenly put into a world they've never been in before. They're suddenly in the media spotlight. They're dealing with trauma, torment, unanswered questions. So they look to you for help, you being the police. And if the police strategy is wrong in terms of care, then it all falls down because they are entirely reliant on the police to support them in an area where they think they will know what they're doing as far as the media strategy goes. They've got it wrong. What we've now got to go back to is, whatever the background of Nicola, Whatever was going on in her life, she's still missing. And there are people out there who can help. Because she's gone somewhere. She hasn't simply vanished. So is she in the water? In which case her body will turn up at some stage. Is she on land somewhere? And hopefully, as people walk out, as it gets more and more warm, people will find her if that's the case. And of course, if she's moved on to move on her own life with whatever's going on, then she'll have contact with people. Those three things exist, and the people that will solve that is the public. Jodie.
Brilliant. I just want to bring in a couple of questions here, and thank you everyone for leaving them down below. There's been some great stuff come through. You can ask your own, #AskMark. This one's from Nicole H. What did you think of the communication style of the press conference and the tone in the press conference? They're saying they found it unpleasant. And just adding on to that question, this one's from Jerry Edmonds. Do you think Paul should now do his own statement and press conference now? And obviously sending love to the family there as well. So, yeah, what's your thoughts on those 2 points?
I thought the press conference was far more professional. I like the fact that the Assistant Chief Constable came out there and set out from a very senior officer's point of view the seriousness of this case and the impact that it's had on the community, the policing style. I think in terms of the senior investigating officer, she's clearly qualified. She's been in the police for a very long time and investigated very serious cases. It's always a difficult one because it's about getting that balance right in terms of coming across professional, but also coming across in an emotional and engaged way. And that's a very difficult challenge. And some people don't always rise to that challenge. Some people just don't have it on them. They can be quite cold. It doesn't make them bad. Actually, at the end of the day, is it important to us whether or not that person that's leading the investigation comes across in a very sympathetic and heartful way? Or is it more important that they're very good at doing their job, albeit their communication and their humanity element is perhaps not on the same level as some other people? So I don't want to be critical. I think she came across in a very professional way. I think that they misunderstood what the impact was going to be of saying that this was a high-risk missing person, totally miscalculated that. So I was much more impressed with their press conference. They were clearer. That was what's most important, is that the Superintendent Riley, who'd become the face of the media, she'd say things and then she'd say something that differed from what she said previously. And that causes problems because people hang on detail. And if you're not entirely clear on detail, people will look and go, well, actually, that's not exactly what you said. What did frustrate me yesterday was the SIO, the superintendent, was being a little bit critical about people jumping to conclusion, people coming up with ideas and theories, people suggesting that the police had said this. Well, a lot of it was because you had said that. You had been unclear in the terms of the way you'd said something. Rather than saying, we have 3 hypotheses, we're focused on all of them, but at this present moment in time, we're particularly focused on her going in the river. That's not what they said. What they said and what it came across as was that we have one main working hypothesis, is that she's gone in the water. Okay, the detail is very similar, but the way that it's put across has a massive difference in understanding and meaning. And that is what they got wrong. And as a result of that, we're now in a position where they came to a press conference being critical of everybody else having a go at them, when actually they needed to reflect a little bit and go, do you know what? We got some of that wrong. We were unclear in some of the detail and the nuances of the way that it came across. And that's our fault. And they should have been more honest. But the problem is how many senior investigating officers, how many police officers would stand there, how many members of the, in working life, how many people would stand there and go, do you know what? I made a mistake. I got that slightly wrong, but I want to put it right. And to be fair to the police, when I spoke with them in detail, the police said, we did get some things wrong. We have made some mistakes here. We're going to try and put that right. I hear what you're saying, Mark, and a lot of what you've been saying, we totally agree with. And of course, at the end of the day, it now puts Paul in a position of, where is he? He's really supporting the police. He's very much behind the police. The police have said, don't talk to the media, keep quiet. But there is a position where we can see there now, Peter is walking with Paul and the family liaison officer, the person in the tie behind the back. And this is, Peter, you're having some real detail, showing them what the work that he's done. One of the questions that was just asked was, what about Paul now? Should he do a press conference? I think he should. I think Paul should come out supported by the rest of the family, Emma, the best friend, whoever it is. I think they should come out and they should say, do you know what? Nicola's life recently has been difficult. It's been a challenge. It's been a challenge for her. But let's not focus on that. Let's focus on finding her. We all have challenges in our life. Open his heart. And if he opens his heart and he's very clear, I think publicly we'll all get behind him. Jodie, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm very cold here, and also the fact that, let's move on. Let's deal with a couple more final questions. Is there anything else?
Yeah, so I think there's a really great question here, actually, just to cap us off and cap off the podcast. And just to remind everyone to obviously subscribe to True Crime News Quest. We've been covering this case fully. We've had some great insight from you, Mark. So remember to subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. So this one's on Lottie, the final one to cap us off today. The police hinted yesterday they are still resourcing this fully, but might scale down. What happens then?
Yeah, I don't think we're far away now. The Assistant Chief Constable has to. The sad reality is, public resources are limited. Policing resources are limited. All of this costs money, and huge amounts of money. So the police will have to be in a position where very shortly they say, we have to scale back. There are police officers walking around here throughout the whole of yesterday. There's a lot of police officers here. The helicopter was up here yesterday, and we can see from those photographs, the video there, that actually that search still continues in the wider element. They've now searched it all the way down to the sea. So, and the inquiries are still ongoing. The police officers said yesterday that there are still 40 detectives still working on that. I think within the next 7 days, we'll see a huge scaling back of this, and of course they will still continue to investigate, but those resources that have currently been applied to it will massively shrink, and we'll see a much smaller investigation. Let's draw this to a close. The position is that Nicola Bulley is still missing. We had revelations yesterday in terms of her private life, and I think we have to really put that into context. This is a person who was struggling with elements of her life, as we all do at times, and that caused her to be impacted on by certain other elements, whether that be drink, drugs. Depression has a huge impact in our life. But she had the support. She had the support of a loved one. She had the support of family, and she clearly was getting support to some degree, because there was a police call to her address where police turned up with a mental health workers in the car. She was clearly getting that support. What we need now is to get behind Nicola, her family, Paul, the 2 kids, and the rest of the other families and friends, and support them. Let's not be critical of them. The critical element is not for now. She was going through a difficult time in her life, as we all do, but she's missing. And she's missing in a way that we need to bring her home to her family. Her family are desperate for answers. They put their faith in the police, and I totally understand that. The police have failed in many ways. They failed certainly in their media strategy, but behind the scenes, they're doing a good job. They're working really hard. They're cutting down every single avenue to close those avenues down to get to a point where could she possibly be. What we now need is the public. As the days get warmer, the public will ultimately find Nicola. There may be somebody out there who holds that vital clue. I don't know. But I do know from all the investigation I've done here and the communication I've had with the family and I've had with the police is I do not believe she went into the water by that bridge. And let's just deal with one thing. Those people who are being critical, saying, it's wrong. Why are you out there talking about it? There's been criticism for those people online, those armchair detectives come out. I've got years of experience, not just as a police officer, but since then I've reviewed murder investigations. I've investigated some of the biggest cases and found new evidence where police haven't been able to do it. I've brought that into the public domain, and as a direct result of many of my investigations, people get prosecuted. That's why I've come here. I came here specifically to help the family,